When it comes to your path of healing and growth, no matter the method you're using, the vital point is to practice. If you're ready to transform your life and live with clarity, purpose, and a connection to wholeness, then you're in the right place. Welcome back to The Vital Point. I'm your host, Jonathan Schechter. I'm a breathwork facilitator and integration coach, and the goal of this show is to inspire you to take action for yourself, whether that's the first step on your journey of healing and self-discovery, or you're already a seasoned traveler. The truth is, you have the capacity to evolve and bring your intentions and dreams into the world, and there's never been more access to so many incredible modalities that can help you on your journey. This podcast will help you learn simple methods you can use to change your life with guided practices and interviews with practitioners who are doing the work. I want you to feel confident and inspired to take the next step on your own pathway to integration and wholeness. So take a deep breath and let's drop in. My guest today is Rachel Broom. She is a somatic experiencing practitioner. She's part of the training staff that I've been fortunate enough to connect with through my own journey to become certified as a somatic experiencing practitioner. She's a therapist based here in Tucson. She's a Reiki teacher, an intuitive healer. She is just an incredible human. And that's kind of how she connects. That's part of her message, is to be a human first, so that we can really connect with each other on that base human level and celebrate our own uniqueness, where we can feel safe enough and connected enough that our nervous systems open into this wider space of safety, of thriving, of authenticity. And just so grateful to be able to connect with Rachel and share this interview and the practice that she shares with you here. And we really get into all things somatic experiencing. I definitely use the opportunity a little bit selfishly to ask some good questions and things that I'm learning and integrating in my own somatic journey. But the thing is, for me, somatic experiencing has truly transformed my life, and I share it with a lot of people. I'm one of those people like yelling from the rooftops about how you should be doing somatic work. And even, I working at a residential treatment center where there's a lot of people that are very much in the CBT talk therapy world, and that's what they feel is their pathway to healing. And not that I want to take that away from anyone, but oftentimes I find that the key to overcoming the challenges that brought people into being in a residential treatment center, things like anxiety disorders and depression and addiction and, substance use disorders, that those things are stemming from trauma, whether it is a single event that led to PTSD or complex and developmental trauma. There's some sort of disconnection. There's something that the body is carrying and bracing from, or just trying to manage. And I think that is one of the themes of this episode, is that we're all doing the best that we can, and that there are tools and systems like somatic experiencing that help us work with this situation a little bit easier and breathe a little bit easier and ultimately be a more authentic human. And so I'm truly grateful to Rachel for her time, and super excited to share this episode with you. Before we get into the interview, and there's going to be a practice right after that Rachel leads us in, I just want to share a really exciting announcement. If you haven't heard already, at the beginning of 2025, I launched the Blue Magic Alchemy Collective on the School platform. It's a nexus point where the paths of integration can converge. And it's really the hub of my work and the community that's developing within Blue Magic Alchemy. All the things that you need are in that one place. There's a calendar to stay connected and sign up for live breathwork and other integrative workshops and events. There's the message boards so that you can interact with other alchemists and practitioners and share your wins, feel supported. And there's a section where I post guided meditations, breathwork, and other integrative practices. I would love for you to join the calls live, but we can't always do that. Sometimes people need practices in other times of the day. And so now there's a whole section of recorded material there that you can use for yourself. And there's so many more things that we're planning. There's a live open house with workshops and giveaways, group meditation challenge that's going to lead into a live course that will live on the site. And of course, as I mentioned, you can join all these things live for free, or you can check out the recordings if the live events already passed. So come join me there. It's school.com/Blue Magic Alchemy, and you'll find a lot of cool stuff there. I guarantee that. And it's free. So what do you got to lose? If you're enjoying the show, everything on there is going to be right up your alley. So again, that's school.com/Blue Magic Alchemy. And now, without further ado, please enjoy this interview with Rachel Broom. Welcome to the Vital Point podcast.
Hey, thanks so much. Good to be here.
It's a good, laughing sort of day. We've been chatting for a few minutes before we hit record and having a good time, and that's always a nice place to start out, right?
It is. Gotta have laughter.
Yeah. And I love your room there. It's so much green, so many plants.
So much. I have a whole plant problem now, but maybe it's not a problem. They're pretty nice.
Yeah, no, I love it. You definitely have inspired me. I've done, just full disclosure for the audience, like I've done sessions with Rachel, and her office is an amazing jungle of wonder. And definitely inspired me. Like, you can't, all of mine are like off camera, but it's a little fraction of what you got going on.
Plants hold everything with us. I was reading a study that they used electrodes and they were reading the plants, and they're stressing out rats, and the plants were stressed and the rats were stressed, and when the rats were happy, the plants are happy. So for what it's worth, I think they're pretty good at holding us.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Here's your weird nugget of the morning.
Right. Yeah. Like, I wonder if they can kind of help out and like absorb a little bit, or maybe if it's working in the opposite, like just try to tap into the plant's energy and kind of ground.
Totally.
Yeah. So Rachel is an amazing somatic experiencing, is the preferred term practitioner or professional? I've heard it both ways.
It's practitioner. The official title is Somatic Experiencing Practitioner, but I'm fluid.
But so she's also a professional. Yes. And just really grateful to have the opportunity to talk with her. And we're going to talk about somatic experiencing and maybe some psychedelic integration, or how SE fits in with inner work. So you are definitely in for a treat here. I wonder if it would be okay just to kind of help us all drop in together, if we could start with a little practice.
I love a little practice. I'm a pretty off the cuff kind of gal, so I was thinking about, talking about plants, and maybe just, even if you close your eyes, or if you don't want to close your eyes, but just finding some roots for a minute and just noticing the ways you can drop down to Mother Earth here, the way gravity just hugs us right to the earth all the time. And then just noticing if there's anything on the inside that starts to let down. Any softening you notice, any ease you notice, maybe any warmth. And then we're going to take a little trip around the body, if you feel like it. Of course, at any time, if it doesn't feel good to you or you'd rather keep your eyes open or look around your space, please feel free to do so. You have all the choices you want. But I'm wondering, if you all will find the place you're either sitting or standing. And if you just imagine that if you're sitting on a chair, that chair kind of rises up underneath you to meet you a little more. It's pushing back. What happens next? For me, I usually track that my pelvis gets a little bit wider and my spine softens. And lots of us like to brace there. It's a good place for us to help hold and manage. And noticing anywhere else in your body that might want support. That could be moving to the ground, could be finding the back of the chair, allowing your body to take in a little bit more of that support. And if 5% is too much, 2% is great, or 1%, just a little bit of support. And then we're just going to try this. I like to go head to toe, but just noticing the way that your head sits on top of your neck. And any way that needs to move or shift. Anything that might feel good. And traveling down a little bit through the neck to the shoulders, noticing their relationship. And sometimes as we move our attention, there's little micro movements that want to come through, and those are always welcome, as much as you want to allow them. From shoulders, traveling down a little bit, noticing the shoulder joint, biceps, triceps, elbows. Just checking in if your arms feel comfy. And maybe you're noticing they feel heavier or softer. It's possible to not notice anything at all. And traveling down a little more through our forearms, our wrists, hands, fingers. See how it is to invite the breath into this place too. I like to imagine joints can kind of expand and contract as we're breathing. So just inviting breath through the shoulders and the neck and the arms. And then moving back through around the spine, we're just going to start at the upper spine and move all the way down through tailbone. So taking your time, just traveling a little slower, noticing ribs. Noticing the way your pelvis is sitting. The question I always like to ask here too is, does it feel like you're right-sized? I borrowed that question from my friend Marie Michael. But it could be the depth of you needs to be smaller or bigger. It could be the width of you, the height of you. What size feels good for your body to take up today? And then traveling down a little bit further, you have these really cool sit bones that help us. And our legs and our knees. So noticing if they need to move or shift. I don't know about you all, but I'm feeling a little bit heavier and more dense, but also possible to notice something different or nothing at all. And then we'll travel all the way down through the calves, to the ankles, to the feet with those cute little toe joints we all have. And I like to imagine here, if we breathe up in through our feet from the earth on one side, and then back out through the other foot on the other side. So it's kind of this cyclical way that we belong to the earth. And just noticing what that's like on the inside of the body. And maybe imagining with your next in-breath that this breath goes all the way up to the top of your head and then back out all the way down through your feet. This huge body in here, we get to take up all this space. Noticing any other movements that want to come through. And then if your eyes are closed, you might notice the quality of the light that comes through your eyelids as I kind of invite you back to present time and space before you open them. Taking your time, you can kind of flutter them open or softly notice what it's like to allow them just to open. And then noticing how your space looks. Is anything different? Do things look sharper or clearer? Are you looking across at your laundry that needs to be done and saying, we'll get to that in a minute? And just really letting yourself take it in. And noticing anything on the inside that feels different. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There's two things that I noticed that I love about these type of moments. The first one is just as a practitioner myself, like I'm always so excited to hear how other people lead and welcome us into the space.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always feel like there's some little nugget or just a phrase or an extra piece of what you do that is that I can I'm gonna try that next time, or like that's just so brilliant. So that's the one piece, right? Like I get really excited about that. And then
Mm-hmm.
also just noticing how just even those couple of minutes, like just how much it changes my experience and the energy. And we were both pretty giggly, and there's nothing wrong with that. And at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, just like the sort of settling and like, okay, now I'm ready to do a podcast,
Yeah, the landing that happens. So I'm like, oh, there's my
Right.
body.
Yeah. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
I'm often sort of reminding people of that, is like it's it's not that we have to have like this total like 24/7 change where we're focused in on these different
Oh,
practices or these different techniques. Just these little moments can
totally.
be so transformative in our day and to our energy, to like how we're seeing the world.
Totally. I mean, the name of the game for me is integration. So anytime anyone's like, oh my gosh, you're an SEP, you must be totally embodied. I'm like, pfft. I mean, I'd say I'm better embodied like 10% of the day, but it took me just tiny pockets of 30 seconds of looking around or noticing the chair under me or small moments.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's such a good place to maybe like go deeper.
For sure.
Cuz yeah, it is, right? It's just about like, am I open to just more, right? Like there's more to be aware of. There's more that I can uh choose to maybe zoom in and like focus on for a few moments, rather than just letting it go by. Like it's happening anyway.
Yeah.
We're just usually not noticing it.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been really into this book called The Language of Breath
Ooh,
lately.
yeah.
And it's one of the things I really like about it as I've been reading it is I feel like there's so much of what he's saying that is very like aligned with SE, but he's not using the exact language of SE, which is really cool. But like the first thing that he says to do in the book is to do this interoception exercise every day, where you're like first putting your hand on your heart and like just noticing your heartbeat, and then like taking the hand off and seeing if you can still notice the heartbeat moving through your
Amazing.
hand,
Yeah.
right? And then just making this point that this is happening 24/7,
Right.
but we're just not paying
Not tuned
attention to
into
it.
it.
Like the magic of what's happening in the body all the time, that that there's blood just moving into the tips of our fingers and our toes and all throughout the body, and we're just completely like tuned out, right? Which
Totally.
is, it's and what would life be like like we wouldn't get anything done if like we were just, oh my God, there's blood moving through my fingers all the time, right? And you're just fascinated
Totally.
by that experience. But that there's just such a bigger world inside of
Oh,
us.
so big. Oh, and it's nice that it's always there. I mean, like even these small exercises, I'm like, that's right. I can always tap into it. Maybe I don't want to tap into it when I'm driving and going and moving about my life or, but it's nice that I've got little pockets of time where it's like, oh, heartbeat. It's right there. The way that bodies breathe, they're always breathing. Even if we're breath
Right.
holders or bracers, or that we're always just moving. Bodies are doing their jobs for us. It's kind of sweet.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's something I notice in SE type people is like they're kind of inviting us to notice the magic of our bodies and our experiences and like just appreciate it. Like, you mentioned the sit bones, right? Like that we have these things that are really cool, like little things that we can be grateful for that we just sort of take for granted usually.
Oh yeah. I mean, I one of my very good friends, body worker friends, who's an SE person, at one point would teach me to like imagine that your joints could breathe, and it was like that was just such a sweet thing, like feeling breath move through the body instead of just like, oh, your lungs are doing the thing, but the way your whole organism kind of, even your heart isn't on that action. It's like it's this really intricate, beautiful process that we don't necessarily pay attention to, but it's there for us if we want to.
Right, right. Yeah, and then for me, one of the magical parts of that is that the more that we take those little moments to notice or to practice, the easier that awareness comes back.
Totally. Yeah, it's just
Like, oh,
practice.
I'm just noticing something that might seem completely mundane to somebody else, but like just appreciating the magic of it, like a hawk going across the sky, or just the
Totally.
beauty of, the nature outside, or like you said, just like, what do you notice in your room right now? Like, um, that was one of the things when I first started doing SE that like always amazed me is like
Right.
I'd be in these like really intense, emotional experiences with my eyes closed and probably half the time like crying and snot coming down. And then like as we would transition out at the end of the session and do some orienting and kind of coming back into the room. And I'd always be like, did you just get that painting? Or like that sculpture or whatever. Like I've never seen that before. And the like my therapist would be like, no, it's been there the whole time. Like, whoa.
Oh, I have those experiences too, where I'd be like, I know that you did that while my eyes were closed. You clearly just reorganized your whole office.
Right, exactly. Yeah. There
Mm.
there's a room that I work at. I have a lot of groups in at Cottonwood, and which is a residential treatment center for behavioral health here in Tucson. And there's a painting, or not a painting, but a photograph of these horses drinking water. And there's something ironic about that. Um, and I swear to God, like out of the year I've been working there, I didn't notice it for like maybe 8 or 9 months. And when I did notice it, it was so funny, just the irony of like, well, you lead a horse to water. Um, and I just lost it. And now whenever I see it, it reminds me of that moment, of that sort of like that
So
first, like,
sweet.
wow, like I didn't notice that for like a whole 8 or 9 months, even though I've been working in this room.
Yeah, I have lots of that. I remember doing SE really early and just doing that, like let your eyes wander and just be curious. And it was like amazing the amount of things I could see that I had bought that were in my own space that I just either forgotten about or didn't know they looked like that or missed that there was silver on a picture when I thought it was blue or, whatever. It's just like, this is garbage that I've been missing everything.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So for people that maybe are not familiar with the show or somatic experiencing, I know we've talked about it a few times on the podcast before, but could you give us just like maybe this concise little elevator pitch of what SE is?
Oh gosh, I can certainly try. I mean, the short version I usually tell people is it is learning to manage and balance our organism needs or organic self, if you want to call it body, with our personality self, So personality being like the ways we're conditioned, whether that's gender roles or roles we play in society or roles we play in our family or the things we think we should do, an organism is very often what our mammal self would do, So it could be like, gosh, I don't know, maybe I get startled in a grocery store and like I really want to run, but like I don't want to be that weird girl running through the grocery store, So it's kind of creating spaces where you get to complete something that maybe the body wanted to do that you didn't get a chance to do. And it can,
Mm.
I mean, it has a label as a trauma therapy, but really I'm like, it's kind of a therapy to learn how to be human. I think we all need help with that. We have a culture that really gets us disembodied and going and do and no breaks. And, I mean, I don't know how you are here, but I see most people today. I'm like, how you doing? And everyone's like, yeah, great, busy. Good. How are you? There's not this like, hey, how you doing? Or it's like, oh, good. Yeah. How do you know? Oh, my chest is soft and I landed in my chair. We don't have those kinds of check-ins. So it's like balancing the two of those is really what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that what you just said in terms of what I heard is curiosity, like
Totally.
asking how you know. You said something else when we were doing the body scan of like, um, just sort of checking in, like, do you feel like you're the right size? Like what's coming up for you? So there's these curiosities and these
Mm.
inquiries into the sort of a deeper level of experience rather than just saying, how are you doing? Well, I'm fine. Okay. Well, number one, fine is not an emotion.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
But how do you know?
Yeah.
And that's
What
like such a powerful inquiry.
And I think too, like that, I think you touched on interoception earlier, but I remember sitting with Kathy Kane one time, which I'm sure you have heard loads about.
Yeah.
But she was talking about, part of what happens is when we're really little humans, like toddlers, something happens and we feel a sensation and we look to our parents to figure out what it is. And, if we have parents that are like, oh my gosh, you fell, you're fine, get up, move on, we learn to not listen to those cues. And so maybe it's like, I start to feel my throat get sore. I wake up with a sore throat and I'm like, oh no, it's COVID. Or I'm like, I'm just dehydrated. It's the very same information dictates totally my experience based on past experience. So that stuff
Mm.
can be part of what we're going after too. It's like, oh, how do you know? Is your interoception calibrated in a way that supports this beautiful, full, rich life, or is it calibrated around stress? Because we need both. We can't have just one or the
Right.
other.
Yeah. Yeah. And getting curious about how you know you're feeling something is
Totally.
so powerful. Like oftentimes, like one of the things I'll do at Cottonwood with people is like help them learn orienting. And
So good.
what I like to do is, and this is another reason I wanted to have you on the podcast, is just like to learn from somebody that, knows a lot more about this stuff than I do. And just kind of get feedback. But like I'll do it twice. And the first time I really won't say anything about it. I'll just be like, hey, would it be okay just to try this thing?
Yeah.
And then when we get done, I'll just say like, how are you feeling? Do you notice any changes? And then that leads into this inquiry of like, if they say like, oh, I feel calmer. And it's like, oh, well, how do you know that you feel calmer? And that's usually the showstopper. It's like, well, wait, hold on a second. How do I know? Oh, this is really interesting. And then I'll go through it. I'll explain it. Like I'll explain the psychoeducation piece of it and the nervous system piece of it. And then let's do it again, but let's do it even slower. Like let's go a little bit deeper with it.
Totally.
But yeah, that it's such a fascinating question of like, how do you know?
Hmm.
And so we're not really paying attention to that most of the time.
Oh, super rarely. Well, and I think too, I don't think, at least I don't remember doing my own therapy where there's really like a good roadmap, Like I think a lot of us moving through stuff or getting more in touch with like our who we are instead of who we think we should be thing is like we know who we're not first, And so it's usually like, oh, I always have this pain in my chest because I'm anxious. And it's like the first thing you notice usually is that it's not there. You're not going to be like, oh, my chest feels great and open and soft and no more anxiety. It's going to be like, oh, it's not as bad. That's like step one.
Right.
And that orientation gives us a good landing point where it's like we just get to keep coming back and saying, what do you notice now? How is it to notice that thing? The only problem with orientation, I usually tell people, is like, it is so simple. You're going to think I'm making it up.
Right.
So
Yeah.
simple.
That's definitely something I've adopted, just from working with you,
Oh,
is
wonderful.
just reminding people of that. Like, cause it's true. Like, I thought it was kind of bogus when I first started doing it. Cause I'm like, what are we even doing here? Like, we're not really doing anything. And sometimes
Totally.
I get that. I can see the wheels turning inside people's heads, like the skepticism. And yet it's like, well, don't worry about what's happening between your ears. Don't worry about the thought. Just, would it be okay just to try it and see
Totally.
what happens, right? And if
Totally.
it's not for you, it's not for you.
Yeah.
um, and the what I've been adopting, especially from the language of breath, is that it is like learning a language. And
Oh, for
so
sure.
if you use that metaphor, um, when we start to learn a language, we don't do it very well. And we might put the emphasis on the wrong syllable, right?
It's so
And like
clunky.
somebody that's like really like a native speaker of that language is probably like looking at us a little funny, maybe giggling a little
Totally.
bit at us, mispronouncing certain things. But over
Totally.
time, it gets more rich and more complex. We're able to express more complex ideas
Yeah.
better and
Yeah.
clearer, right? And that's kind of what somatic experiencing can be like, at least in my experience, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like going from that, that first moment you mentioned of like, oh, well, wait, there's an absence of something that's usually there. Or like, you'll ask somebody, well, what do you feel right now? And they're like, well, there's something in my stomach. Oh yeah. Like, or I feel something, like, where is it? It's my stomach. Well, okay. Like anything else? No, there's something there, like, and then just that language that develops, like, oh, there's maybe a color that comes up, a shape, there's movement, there's these other sensations around it. And then for me, where like what really got me hooked was like, oh wait, there's an emotion that's coupled with this that's coming up,
Totally.
or a memory,
Totally.
not just the sensation. Like all of a sudden that simple sensation becomes something that's so rich.
Yeah, there's information right there.
Yeah.
I always
Yeah,
think of the
absolutely.
image I always have in my head is like little ducks like skittering across the pond, where they look really like calm, but their feet are going super crazy. It's like if they just swim a little slower, they get to see all the stuff that's under there. It's like that's kind of how SE feels to me. It's like we're just going so fast, we're not sinking into any of the stuff. And if you slow down just a little bit, sometimes there's a whole lot of stuff to listen to on there.
Yeah, I love that analogy. That really makes sense.
I'm good for analogies.
Yeah, I love it. So then where do people take that from there? Like yeah, this more awareness can be really helpful.
Hmm.
um I've I've always found, just because my experience with like mindfulness meditation, that there's a lot of overlap um
That makes
to
sense.
those practices.
Hmm.
Maybe there's less, usually with mindfulness we're thinking of it more like the mind and the thoughts, rather than like our awareness of the body and the sensations.
Mm.
But where can we go with that as far as SE?
I mean, I think ultimately one of the things I'm always trying to help people go for is like behavioral flexibility, for lack of a better word, that like slowly as we develop, I mean, I more or less call it the map. So most people show up in my office and it's like, we've got a map where every fast food restaurant is. And I'm over here and I'm like, we're going to teach you how to cook like a home cooked meal, some good soul food. And you're like, okay, I've got McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, Chipotle. What are you even talking about? So it's like, we've got to build a common language. And then we have to get used to just finding landmarks on the map and just going, oh, I didn't know that was there. Okay. That's often a thing I'm looking for is like, do you trust your own sensations? Do you trust your own self? Which, if you don't, welcome to the team. There's lots of us that find our bodies have different opinions and we don't like it. and then just building capacity to be with what happens next. I mean, a lot of it, I think, is just allowing space for the body to do something that it might need, even if we're not in the driver's seat.
Mm. Yeah, because if I'm following you, and I hope I am, because what the body wants to do oftentimes is like sort of the release from this thing that's wanted to complete for some time, right?
For
Like when
sure.
we talk about trauma or we talk about getting triggered by something, it's like there's this circuit that keeps trying to complete.
Mm-hmm.
And what would happen if we actually allowed that completion in whatever way that it looks?
Yeah. And sometimes we need more than one shot at completion. I mean,
Mm.
I feel like the classic example is always car accidents, but I'm like, man, when I reworked one, it was like, in one instance, it was like I got out of the car and saw my car get smashed. In another instance, it was like I didn't even leave my house that day. In another instance, I was like over on a sidewalk walking, and that person that hit me wasn't driving. So I was like, there's all these ways my brain had concocted. Here's all of the different variations we can have safety. And it just needed space. And I think another present human. I mean, I think that's a big part of work, especially integration work. Like, we just need someone kind of helping us attend to our own nervous system.
Yeah, I love that. There's something that you said a little bit ago that came back to me, and that's the power of separating the experience that we're having or the sensation, whatever that is, from the meaning that we usually
Mm.
uh, couple that with,
Mm-hmm.
and just how powerful that idea is.
Oh my God.
Like
Yeah.
lately I've been questioning whether there's anything else, and maybe that's just because I'm only, intermediate, but like I'm like, oh, this seems like this is the thing. Like this is such a big deal, is like being able to see that there are other possibilities outside of the meaning that I am prescribing to this particular sensation or memory or experience.
And I think, I mean, like, humans like knowing our stuff. We like what's going on. We like knowing what's in our brain. We like knowing that, oh, I have this response because I had this trauma happen, or whatever the thing is. So I think sometimes the magic of SE is just figuring out that you don't actually know all the things you think you know, and you get more and more okay with not knowing. And it could be the thing you've never talked about in therapy, or the thing you weirdly forgot about, or I mean, I've had tons of people I've worked with from like, anything ever happened to you that felt kind of scary? And they'll be like, no. And then we're like, sessions later, and they're like, oh, one time I fell out of a tree when I was 3, and I think I was in surgery for like 2 days or something. Like, it's some like crazy story that they just happen to forget about. I think lots of us have that kind of experience where we have stuff in there, but we're not consciously thinking about how it's impacted us. It just has, and we moved on. And the body doesn't, I mean, nervous systems don't tell time, I think, is the cool thing I've learned. So you can always go back and help them get more completion in.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good reminder. Nervous system doesn't tell time. Yeah, we can get instantly sort of transported back into these imprints
Totally.
and maybe not even be conscious of them. That's another one of my big takeaways of like sort of aha light bulb moments
Mm-hmm.
is um I definitely live in my head, and and I'm constantly making meaning, and there's been times where it's like, well, what if the meaning didn't really matter at all? Like what if we just set that aside and just dealt with the sensation,
Mm-hmm.
and just let ourselves be with that, right? Because as much as we'd like to make meaning, there are going to be times and experiences, maybe those imprints that happened during the birthing process or
For
pre-verbal
sure.
or at a time where we're just not going to have that the satisfaction of the meaning, right? or
Totally.
the person that was there with us, or is no longer there. Like you can't go
Right.
and ask them like, well, what did you mean to do by that? Like, can I correct this meaning? But
Mm-hmm.
there's still value in just going through the experience and the sensations and just whatever else is coming up, completely divorced of any sort of meaning.
Oh yeah. I mean, I got really lucky. I got to take a training with Peter and Joshua, talking about like altered states of experience and near death states and all sorts of stuff. And it was fascinating the amount of stuff that people could work through and just didn't really have narrative around. But it was clear that the body was like, oh shit, that's a big experience, and just having someone have hands on in a supportive way and people attending to them while they could kind of go out and re experience this really big, disorganized, chaotic state with people that are containing and kind and loving. People had beautiful experiences. Or it's like, I wish more of us got that. I wish more of us had that space in our culture outside of a training. It feels important.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things I appreciate about breath work is like, here's this other way that we, have to deal with these experiences that we can't really talk through or, process from a cognitive behavioral type of therapy lens.
Totally.
It's just like, and oh, like, oh, you had this birth experience and this is how it's showing up in this archetypal or way that hundreds of other thousands of other people have
Right.
also experienced. I always wondered about that when I first started getting involved in psychedelics. It was like, well, how come people have the same type of experiences? That seems awful strange. And then it's like, well,
So
wait, but
weird.
if it's our brain and our consciousness trying to make sense of this event that like literally we didn't have the capacity to deal with,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's at the very least pretty good theory, like a pretty good guess of like why we're having these similar
Oh,
experiences.
yeah. I mean, I think especially folks that have really early, like hard birth experiences or near death experiences, those are folks really often that I'm seeing doing that intensity seeking thing. And I think in part it's because it's that subconscious, like this really big, overwhelming thing happened to me and I didn't have AD control. So subconsciously, I'm going to get back in that state, hoping for completion, not knowing that's what I'm doing, except maybe it'll be a little bit different. There'll be a guide with me, or there'll be a therapist with me, or my partner will be with me, or whatever, hoping that we get a different experience. And without context, kind of dependent clues, it's hard to get completion. But I think lots of
Yeah.
people have that urge.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a great question. Like how can we do that in a more organized or like intentional way, right? Because like rather than sort of the randomness and the element that I think you're speaking to,
Yeah,
right? That
yeah,
we're throwing ourselves into this big field and hoping for a particular outcome. But are there ways to maybe make that field a little bit more manageable or
totally.
intentional or uh, yeah.
I mean, I'm like, I don't know about for you, but for me, I'm like integration and titration. Like those are the things. The easy way I explain that to people is like, I'm not going to, if you've been right back to my goofy fast food analogy, if you've been barely surviving off tiny bites of fast food, and I'm like, we're gonna home cook a meal and we're gonna have a giant feast together. Let's do it. Here's all of this, what beautiful food. I'm not going to be like, eat all of it, figure it out, prepare it out. It's like, we're going to take a little tiny thing. And maybe today we're going to look at fresh fruit, and once you take a little bite, we're going to allow that to digest. So little bites, titration, digesting, integration. It's like little by little. And as you do it little by little, your stomach's going to grow. You're going to get a bigger capacity to eat more, to have more experience, to be more with your scary states or your oh shit states or whatever happens. It's like little by little is the way that our body and our nervous system can really process what happened instead of just reenacting. We renegotiate instead of reenacting.
Yeah. I love that. And it's funny. I see it so much. Like even within this podcast, like I've talked with people that are on the bleeding edge of sort of this exploration, and their path
Yeah.
has been like, I'm going to take amounts of medicine that when I tell people about it, they don't even think that I'm being serious, right? And I'm fascinated to just chat and listen to these people's experiences because to me I'm like,
Mm.
wow, this is like you're like a pioneer on some final frontier, right?
Totally.
And then there's this whole other group of people, and I would say that I'm definitely in this particular camp, where the more psychedelic experiences, the more inner work, the more whatever it is that they're doing, the less they need, or the less they feel they need.
Yeah.
And when they've listened to that impulse, followed that curiosity, they've actually gotten more out of those more titrated experiences than just eating as many mushrooms as you possibly, can think that you can handle, and like hanging on for dear life, right?
Totally.
So I'm always like really fascinated by that, because the psychedelic experience itself is kind of dysregulating, right? Like
Yeah, it can be for
we're
sure.
we're definitely like getting into the washing machine and turning it on
Yeah.
high.
Oh man. Well, and I think too, without awareness, I mean, lots of us with early experiences or um, folks who have that really kind of like adrenaline junkie, or in SE we call it global high, we have that kind of nervous system that we like to like really manage big intensity and we love it, or we think that we love it, where it's like, that's for me, I'm like, that's a classic example of like, my nervous system has learned that what I know is intensity. What's not on the map is maybe like soft and subtle and restful. And so I really go, 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 go. And I seek out big experiences, which if I can't integrate them isn't going to help me. It, not to say that it can't at all, but in general, if I'm really just overdoing it all the time, I'm just reinforcing this kind of chaos, instead of having these kind of smaller shifts and then digesting that and letting it settle. And I think that's why SE is so weird sometimes, because it's like we're spending a whole session orienting and we're not quote unquote doing anything, but I feel better. Like I remember lots of sessions like that. It's like, because I'm a little bit of an intensity junkie. Where's my intensity?
Right.
You're supposed to make me better. I love big experiences, and figuring out titration was just a different thing. Like these little small trips can be really helpful.
Yeah. It sounds like you're talking about like sort of balancing the experience, right?
For
Like
sure.
if we're so used to a particular sort of access or like type of experience, it can be really unfamiliar to the nervous system to do something else, to do something different.
Totally. Well, and part of, I think, I don't know how you are, but I'm like, with my history, I am a little bit of a control freak, less these days with good SE, but control is safety. So I had this really rigid, I mean, I was up every day at the same time, eating almost the same breakfast, had the same work schedule, as like, I could really control my own responses, my own triggers, because I created a life where there wasn't a lot of variability. So it's like we want life where you can have things that are different and fluctuate, and you're not like, oh my god, I'm gonna die. It's just like, oh, that's annoying. No big deal. I can tolerate it. It's not an issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm always fascinated, to kind of go back to, say, Cottonwood. Like I'll do like a breathwork group with people where it's like we're just doing down regulating, calming, breath work, breathing through the nose, learning to breathe into the diaphragm, slowing the breath down, slowing the
Mm-hmm.
exhale down. Things that for most people make us feel calm,
Mm-hmm.
relaxed, centered, present. And, there's like 10 people in the room, and nine of them come out of the experience and they're like, ah.
Right.
And then there's one person that's like, I'm about to have a panic attack right now. What did you do to me?
Totally. I would be that person.
Yeah, so it's like that whatever we're used to
Yeah.
is what we're used to, and if we throw in
Totally.
something that's totally unfamiliar, it can feel kind of weird and unsafe.
Super weird and unsafe. I mean, all the time I'm trying to unstick with people like, just because it's new doesn't mean it's dangerous. The
Mm,
easy homework I give people all the time is like, I want you to play the I like it, I don't like it game. And then how do you know is part two of that. But it could be like, let's look around your space. What's something you like and something you don't? And most of us find out we have a hard time with one of those. We either really can't find something we don't like, and it might be do it in a space that's not your home environment. Most of us have homes that we really enjoy, but it could be
right.
like a doctor's office. What do you like or not like? There's easy stuff, and then how do you know? Because we're really wanting to unstick. You can not like something, and that doesn't obviously equate that it's dangerous. And many of us have that system that, like, I don't like it, it's bad. It's new, it's scary, it's bad. It's like we just go so quick to like safe, unsafe, safe, unsafe, safe, unsafe. Where it's like there's a whole lot of gray space in here that we want access to. We want that
Yeah.
flexibility.
I mean, that's what you just described is like really core fundamental Buddhism as well. That like the
It
whole
is.
like the whole like the whole reason that we're suffering is that we're either saying, well, I like this, I don't like this, and that doesn't have any intrinsic existence. It's just that's how
Yeah,
we're
it's the
perceiving it,
values we
right?
assign. Totally.
Yeah. I love this like my favorite song could be like the thing that makes you just want to like run
Crazy.
out of the room, right? You're like,
Totally.
please turn that off. And neither of us is wrong, right? Like it's
Totally.
just our experiences and our preferences and how we're experiencing things.
Yeah. And I think it's an important piece of learning how we know what we know. Like I worked with really little kids and parents for a long time. And it was like watching parents try to get their 2-year-old to eat broccoli, which already is just an impossible feat, but it was like, there's an important part to us figuring out that like mom really likes broccoli or dad likes broccoli or my caregiver really likes that thing and I don't. And it's not a bad thing. It's just like a fact. I don't like broccoli. You do. We're still in a relationship. It's no big deal. And not all of us get that experience. There's lots of pressure to like make your kids eat veggies, and kids are
Right.
impossibly picky because now they have opinions. And so it's like there's all these things that we can get set up and conditioned to like really force ourselves to eat or drink a thing. Or I mean, I have a good friend that was like a coffee aficionado for a long time, and we started doing this like not like thing, and she's like, you're the worst. I don't actually think I like coffee. I like the experience. I like going with my friends. I like like the hanging out at a coffee shop. That feels good. But I don't actually like coffee. I didn't know, it was like, well, we slowed down and started tracking what she was noticing. It was like, oh man, she had like an achy tummy and she didn't really like the flavor. And, it's like all these things that she
Right.
just didn't pay attention to.
That's really interesting. I mean, I'm
Funny.
making mental notes for myself, for sure. Not necessarily around coffee, but like, yeah, there's a lot of value in that. And again, we're going back to this, I think, core concept of curiosity rather than sort of collapsing down to a particular judgment.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or that, I like that SE, like intervention when you have a judgment about something, saying like, I'm having the thought that, so it just gives you a little space. So even if you're one of those people, like a lot of us who have a lot of shame, where it's like, oh, I'm such a piece of garbage, like I'm having the thought that I'm garbage gives me space to get in there and be like, well, how do I know that to be true? Or do I have stuff that says it's different? It's like we're just creating space around stuff for things to reorganize.
Yeah.
We're just doing it
Yeah.
gently and curiously.
And that's another thing I found with SE that kind of for me goes along with what you just said is that there really is this radical acceptance of our entire experience rather than like stigmatizing or shaming certain responses, certain impulses, certain behaviors, and like these ones are okay, these ones are not, especially when we're talking about like the fight, flight, freeze, right? Like in the
Totally.
ways that the body and the nervous system keeps us safe.
I mean, and, like if you found this podcast, if you have a therapist or helper, it's like your nervous system didn't pick the wrong response. If you're here
Right.
and you can listen and you can find new patterns, nothing you did tells me that you survived wrong. You did everything right. Our brains are kind of mean to us. So usually what happens is our organism makes choices and it survives and we move on. And then our brain's like, screwed that up. It's not always true. Sometimes that's the
Right.
control we have over the thing. And that just tells us we need to go do some good SE or some good EMDR or, good integration work with someone who's really aware of titration.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We're pretty funny creatures in that way, right?
They're so funny. Humans are so peculiar.
Yeah.
Very similar, but very different.
Yeah. So in addition, I really love like that homework of I like it, I don't like it, and then getting curious about what, how do I know,
Mm-hmm.
and what is So what is something that we can kind of build off of that, like, or continue to kind of explore?
You mean like where are we going with that?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I am usually looking at coupling dynamics, or the easy way I explain that is like the patterning maybe we have that we either don't know about or triggers. But really, to start to rework and get new patterns, we have to be able to notice difference. And so my usual thing is like, I want you to notice difference on the outside, like with the I like it, I don't like it game. And I want you to notice difference on the inside. I mean, really noticing difference, it's one of those things like orienting where I'm like, it sounds so simple and it can be so complicated. It could be both my shoulders hurt and one is like kind of a dull, achy pain and one has a sharp jab to it. Those are different. And I want you to be able to notice the difference. And I want you to notice if it's better or worse. I mean, especially if you've got folks that are like chronic pain people, it's usually not true that it's constant, exactly the same. On a 1 to 10, it's a 10 all day, every day. It's like it might fluctuate between a 6 and a 10 most of the time, but I'm more interested in you noticing when it's a 6 and seeing if we can focus on relief or, I don't know, not panicking about it or not feeling as constricted as usual or whatever the easeful thing is. Because once we do that, we're inviting the body into new patterns that make us feel better, our lives easier, make things gentler for us. It's just better.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. And, just kind of relating it back as well to maybe the work that people are doing, the inner work, and,
Mm.
psychedelics can be a really powerful modality for that. Um, but one of the things that like I'm reminding people of, especially as these medicines become more mainstream, is it's like it's not taking a pill and solving your problems. It's more like you're going to get this big fat spotlight sometimes on these blind
Yeah.
spots or these things that we've forgotten, repressed, chosen to sort of bury, and
Mm-hmm.
then like Pandora's box is open. We've got to kind of work with
Totally.
that and unpack it and
Totally.
try to integrate that. So having a method in which we can continue to explore and be curious and kind of sometimes renegotiate certain things,
Totally.
um, beliefs or the way that we experience something is definitely super
Mm-hmm.
super valuable.
Yeah, and like I think that's the important part of having like a really well contained guide with us. It gets us a chance to be like, oh man, did you see all that stuff that's in my closet? Am I gonna die? Just having someone be like, no, and I'm right here to walk this path with you. Like you have to take your steps, but I will go with you. That's just a
Yeah.
different way to, relate to our experiences. It's like we get to change the relationship with ourselves and how we feel about the relationship with ourselves. And that's important.
Mm. Yeah, I think that leads into something that I was curious about, just getting your thoughts on. The I guess I would frame it as the magic or the gifts of trauma. Now, I want to be like really clear that I think that this is a really personal journey and personal exploration to find the meaning in the traumas that we experience. And I would never want to tell somebody else like, oh, that happened for a reason,
Mm,
or like, don't worry, you'll get it someday, like why that
totally.
happened, right? um but at the same time, there is a like there are gifts that come out of our experiences.
For
And
sure.
like how do we get to that place of sort of that journey?
I mean, I think first is just naming like everyone has their own pace and their own experiences and their own ways of feeling their experiences, and trauma doesn't always have to have a meaning behind it. I mean, lots of it for me, I'm like, I have super sweet experiences and had a really tricky childhood, and I'm grateful for them because I can really empathize with other people. And some of it is being able to hold that both. And I mean, I think that's part of the piece of being like, I didn't deserve the stuff that happened to me. And I can appreciate that I've got this really big heart. I mean, that's a magical thing for me, and I love that. And I don't know that I needed all of those experiences, but taking it slow, getting to the place where you maybe get to have some feelings about it, or you get angry about what happened to you, or you get a response about the thing and you don't have to hold it back or hide it or feel like you have to justify whatever the response is. You just let your organism have whatever crazy response it needs to have. And then you get to sit back and go, okay. And usually, I mean, I think that's the beautiful part about SE too. There's this natural pendulation thing that happens. When I have my response, it will naturally arrive in this place that's more organized, that's easier, where I can look at stuff and be like, that was messed up. And here's this beautiful thing I've got. I don't have to effort so hard at it. It's like we're just going slowly and just taking our time.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about pendulation, just for maybe someone that's listening to this that's a little unfamiliar with that term?
Yes. Pendulation, I think, is just a term Peter made up. But I basically think of it as the back and forth between positive and negative most of the time. And part of that principle is that pendulation happens. If I'm in here and I'm having a bad day and I'm telling you about all the really terrible stuff, at some point it will pendulate over to the less bad stuff or to the good stuff. There's not a whole lot we have to do other than to notice when it happens. And as you do that and you reinforce it, it gets easier to go back and forth between bad and good.
Yeah. And from the SE perspective, the orienting and sort of pausing and slowing down can help with that process of awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was like a game change, like one of those game changer moments for me was like, well, I get that when I'm having like a really strong, what I'd label as a negative or uncomfortable experience, like
Yeah.
the value in sort of pausing and trying to like find that orientation. But it can be just as valuable when I'm having a really strong positive emotion to also pause and just like let myself orient. And I
Totally.
was like, hold on,
Wait a minute.
this is changing the way that like I'm experiencing life
Totally.
in a really cool way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's in some ways, I'm like, this is also natural, I think. If we're out living in little villages and hanging out with each other, it's like, of course, if a cute lizard scampers by, you'd be like, oh my God, did you see that lizard? Except we have these really busy lives where we're just going and, we're less away, I think, from our human selves. And so this just gets us back to like slow it down and just notice what you notice. That's step one, is just being with noticing, seeing what the body needs. All the answers are in there. You don't have to go looking. You don't have to over effort. You just have to learn the language of your specific organism. And they're all a little different.
I love that.
Me too. Like, thank goodness we don't have to know anything. It's in there.
Yeah. There's the soundbite for the episode right there, I think.
I love that.
That was great. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just it's interesting, like there's so much depth to this work, and I'm constantly just humbled by it, like even just sometimes like how being around somebody else might make your experience starts to become richer, or like you can kind of like sort of latch on to their
Like
experience in a little bit. Yeah, a little bit of co-regulation.
Totally.
I was having this some difficulty like a few months ago, and I was like, I don't, the working in a treatment center is like not the easiest
It's
thing
hard. It's hard
to do all the
business.
time,
Yeah.
And somebody that I really like trust and kind of look up to like pointed out, hey, like, do you realize that you're having an effect just by being there? Like, yeah, you have to teach classes and you're doing sessions with people, and that's great, but like you realize like you're having an impact just by being there.
Just being
And I
you.
was like, I guess I didn't think about that. And it kind of goes back to like so many of us that are trying to better ourselves, or do inner work in all the things, right? Like there, I know that I get overwhelmed sometimes by like the amount of pain and suffering and things that are challenging in the world, and like what can I do? Like what's the best thing I can do? And I really love I'll call it the Ram Dass approach of like the only thing that I can do to help you is help myself.
Totally.
Is just to do the work myself, to because then I'm creating this, this energy
Yeah,
that I can walk around with,
totally.
um,
Different flow that
rather
people
than
get to see.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, I think that with anything big and overwhelming, and like, A, it is not our job to fix the entire world. There's lots of us out there helping. Um, Kathy Keene has this really beautiful exercise she calls, I just lost the name of it, but it's basically tapping into the web of helpers, so thinking of, anyone who's gotten you to the place you have now. So any partners, any pets, any ancestors we've got, even if they're not our direct lineage, if we're not close to our family, but just really imagining them behind us, kind of pushing up and holding us upright and tapping
mm,
into that at any point that we need it. It's like there's so many of us out there helping. I all the time have to sit with that thing where I'm like, right, there is heartbreaking grief and overwhelm and devastation and all sorts of terrible things happening in the world. And there's so many of us efforting towards goodness and trying to make it better. And that's enough to get it contained and hold it. We're not holding it by ourselves. We're holding it as a group.
mm. I love that. Yeah, I'm gonna find that because I actually do something similar in my breathwork sessions with people. Like as we're kind of starting to get ready to drop in, like I'll invite them to just bring in any sorts of
Yeah.
support
Yeah.
that they'd like. And that could be, angels or different energetic beings or ancestors, teachers,
Totally.
pets,
Totally.
whatever is going to be supportive, for you in this expansive experience.
Yeah.
Like, and just remembering or reminding them like, hey, this support is available to you all the time,
Always. Yeah.
whenever you want to tap into it.
Hmm.
And it's been really, really powerful for me. And I think um lots of plant medicine ceremonies that I've done do something similar as well. You're really like calling in that support, and at least for a moment remembering that we all are we're in this
Oh,
interconnected web of
yeah.
existence.
Yeah. We're part of it. We're not
Right.
separate. We're not different. We're not better or worse. We're part of the thing.
Yeah.
Hmm. I mean, I think that speaks to like nervous system regulation, integration with plant medicine, any of that stuff. I'm like, yeah, it's only you, and it's only you, and you're part of the web. Just like if you pull a piece of a string in a blanket, it's like the whole blanket moves. Your work totally will make a big impact
Yeah.
for lots of us.
Love it. Hmm. This is like such a nourishing, just warm conversation. Like I feel so good, not only like to be able to talk to you, like somebody that I'm fond of. I find like I'm
Like,
very
yes,
grateful
please.
that I like, yeah, that I've like that I am able to, call you a friend and, get to work with you, and um, just the information that, you and wisdom experience that you
Oh,
have
yeah.
to share. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, I'm so glad I got to be here. I'm like, this was so delightful, delicious, like feels so nourishing,
Yeah.
sweet.
I mean, man, SE is just the best.
I know, I'm like, you can't convince me. I try my hardest. I'm like, don't talk bad about other modalities. Don't do it. But I'm like, SE has just been so good for me. And I think part of it's like, you spend 3 years slowly learning who you are, not who you think you are, who you're supposed to be, or, really making peace with the animal body that we get and the softness of our animal body. It's a magic thing.
Mm, yeah, it's a good reminder, like like we're human and we're still animal, and there's a
We're
lot of
animals.
those. There's a lot of that instinct and sort of unconscious behavior in there,
Totally. Yeah. I mean, we have
and
a frontal cortex, so we judge it, but we have all
right.
those instincts.
I saw this great meme the other day that I've been just, it's been like living rent free in my head of like, it's like this animal, like looking at a human and going, they're like, oh, stupid animal. And they're like, you're the only species that pays to live on planet Earth. And, I
Oh, I
just,
love
that's
that.
just so funny to me. Like, I'm like, uh-huh. Yeah. And I guess for me, that's one of the values. And like, I think you mentioned it of like, if we weren't living these like super uh big lives,
Like
and like
modern
if it
lives.
was right, modern lives, yeah, if it was a
Yeah.
little bit slower and a little
Yeah.
bit softer and like a little bit smaller communities, um you know, maybe we haven't had enough time to sort of adjust to this rapid expansion that we've gone through.
Oh my God. Well,
um
I think that's part of it, that expand, contract. And like that's our, a natural rhythm is this expansion, contraction. It feels like the world is so big, especially the
yeah.
more I learn about nervous systems. I'm like, no wonder we all like psychedelic integration stuff. You get a
Mm,
contained expansion in a container with someone that's sitting and holding you, and then you get to come back and you're in community. I mean, we're designed to be in community by nature of how we are. We're pro-social mammals. We are supposed to be in our villages, and we do not have communities built into our culture anymore. We're making
yeah.
them. I think plenty of us are efforting towards finding really good communities and people who love us and good friendships. And but there's
Yeah.
just not enough inherent space. And I think we're designed that way. Things that are traumatic aren't traumatic if I've got someone going, holy shit, are you okay? Come here, let me give you a hug. It's like immediately I can let down and maybe have a completion instead of walking around and being like, oh, I have to figure out what's next. It's like someone's got the details. I can let my mammal self do its thing. And we're getting those
Yeah.
spaces. I think psychedelics does it well. If you have a good space holder, SE does it well.
Yeah. I've told this story on the podcast a couple of times before, but like I had this really interesting experience a few years ago where I I got laid off unexpectedly. And it was one of those
Worst.
moments of like, hey, can you, well, we got to talk, like just come with
Oh,
me. And and I'm walking down the
sweating.
hall and I'm like, something doesn't feel
Oh
right here,
no.
this isn't good. And then walking
Ooh.
into the room and like having this whole experience. And um but the part that's memorable about it is that like literally before I knew that I was getting laid off, I was on my way out to see my SE practitioner.
Good
And so
timing.
right, like perfect timing, right? So I literally like went from this supercharged experience that was fascinating to me because I was noticing what was happening like to my body and to my nervous system as I'm in this situation. Like I was just noticing the activation come up and like my, body starting to tremble in these certain ways and
Yeah,
trying to contain that, right? Because I'm like in this business
you
meeting
have
with,
to.
right, exactly. Like I
Don't cry, then I'm embarrassed and
right.
panicked.
And there
Mhm.
was there was a like a moment in the meeting where like the HR person was like, so do you have any questions? And I looked at her and I said, honestly, like this is a lot to take in right now. I'm
Nice.
sure I do,
Yeah,
but right now I'm
not
just
right now.
busy trying to like
To figure out what's
just
next.
stick right. Yeah. Like I don't have the capacity to like ask you questions, but I'm sure I will.
Oh,
I'd
for
love to have
sure.
your card so that when I'm a little bit more grounded, I can, but that in itself was like, oh, this is new. I feel like I'm making some progress here. But then to go right from that experience and to be able to process it
Right.
and have somebody like
You
hold
got it.
that experience, everything that I wanted to do, which is like tremble and cry
Yeah.
and like
Tell them to
just
F off.
have
Like,
right, yeah, all the things, right? Like
yeah.
to have that happen when it was so fresh, as opposed to like, oh, like let's try to unpack this thing that happened 20 years ago and
Totally.
has created an imprint ever since, right? It was so cool
Oh,
and so potent.
it's magic
And
when you get that thing.
yeah, yeah, it was like it was really affirming to me that
Yeah.
I was kind of on the right path as far as what I was studying,
That's the
you know.
sweet stuff. I mean, I remember sitting in, I think, my car, and some crazy swerving went through the intersection, and I was like, oh, I could just do the thing and just go to work, and instead I pulled over, and now I have enough capacity that I'm sure I cried and shook and just let my nervous system do its thing, and got back and saw a client, and I was like, the really interesting thing about SE is like I totally could have overridden that. I could have pushed, I could have just gone, but it's
Right.
like SE law is giving us the gift of like, just because you can doesn't mean you have to anymore. Like,
Yeah.
of course you could have, asked questions and you could have been like, yeah, okay, I need a second. I'm going to get into business and I'm going to figure, and
Right.
instead you were just like, I don't know. So it's like honoring our capacity doesn't always mean I can't do something. It's like, I could if I needed to, and I'm not going to, because I'm honoring that this feels like a lot and I just need a break.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a big deal.
And there's a whole spectrum of what we
Totally.
can do, right? Like,
Totally.
here's another great example. Like a while back, I interviewed somebody here on the podcast that I was really, really excited about. Like, I was super surprised that they said yes. And it was somebody that
Amazing.
like inspired me to start my podcast in the first place. And
So
at
cool.
this point, I've got like 50 some podcasts under my belt, right?
Yeah.
And couple hours, like I'm cleaning up my room, I'm kind of getting ready, I'm starting to get myself into podcast mode, and I'm like, oh, this is really weird. I feel really anxious right now. I'm starting to feel
Oh,
nervous.
yeah.
I'm starting to feel like, that's odd. That's not usually how I feel doing a podcast. And okay, let me just kind of sit with it. And as the time is getting closer, it's like it's growing and it's getting more. And
Yes.
and I'm like, I'm just starting to feel like super
Panic.
nervous and like sort of, yeah, panic. And
Totally.
I'm gonna do the podcast, but like, oh my God, what if it doesn't go right? And like, what if I say something stupid? And like, what if, oh, what if, and
Totally.
I literally felt like, and just like we did, we chatted for a few minutes before I hit record. And before I hit record, and this would normally I would have just overridden that, like pushed
Totally.
it to the side and been like, I know what I'm doing. I've done it 50 times
I
already.
got
Like,
this.
I
No
I got
problem.
this. Right. Totally. And been living with that, like trying to manage and override that experience the whole time. And instead, I said, before we hit record, could I just share something with you?
I
I have
love
been
that.
super nervous this whole time. Like I feel really intimidated. I really look up to you. You're like
Yeah.
an inspiration to me. And it feels really strange, but like I just feel completely overwhelmed right now and really nervous. And I
Oh,
just wanted to
yeah.
name that. And they validated how I
Of
felt.
course.
They were like, oh yeah, I feel that way too. Like I felt it earlier this week. I was talking with somebody like, blah, blah, blah person. And I felt myself. And as soon as I voiced it, as soon as I like expressed it and had that validation, I mean, literally just felt it
Yeah.
drain from my body. And then I was able to hit record and I'm like, oh yeah, this is the experience that I'm used to. Like, sure, there's a spectrum of how I feel when I'm doing this podcast,
Oh, of
but like,
course.
I kind of know, what
Like
I'm
what to
doing.
expect. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not perfect. I'm not great, but I know how I usually feel and
Yeah.
what to expect.
Oh, yeah.
And when it's off, it's so obvious to me because of the work that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that I was curious about it and like actually voiced it. And not only was that experience great, but it gave me more confidence to continue to do that. Like
Totally.
when these big overwhelming feelings started to come up in my body, like to be able to pause and voice that with the person that I'm with. And just, it's like, hey, I need a little help here. I need a
Oh,
moment, or this is just how I'm feeling. Like,
totally. Yeah. I mean, I think we're supposed to get lots of help with managing stuff, Like we have a really hyper independent culture too, where I'm like, I just feel like we need more like ease and softness and I mean, I've even worked with people where I'm like, if you are overwhelmed with a conversation with your partner, even being like, I need a pause for 2 minutes just to notice your own self can make a huge difference. Like maybe you're actually terrified that they're going to break up with you and call you an awful person and you've been together for years and it's not a possibility, but somewhere in there, some part of you is like, oh gosh, it's like we're just making space to be humans. No,
yeah,
no overriding. It's finding, I think too, the thing that story strikes me about is like finding a different rhythm that's actually your inherent kind of natural rhythm over this like, intense kind of rhythm. Sometimes I'll call it a trauma or a stress rhythm, but like the way we just get used to doing, where it's like, do you want to do that? Do you
Mm,
need a break? Do you want to check in? Do you need a
yeah.
second? What if you orient? 2 minutes is hardly anything in the grand scheme of life. And 2 minutes just allowing ourselves to notice ourselves can be a huge difference.
Yeah. And sometimes maybe even more. Like I'm having this experience right now, not in this moment, but like presently,
Mm-hmm.
where there was something that my partner did that I noticed that the response that I had, what seemed like it was too much. And
Totally.
rather than like react, I just kind of sat with it. And like it happened 2 days ago. And it wasn't
Amazing.
until last night that this thought kind of bubbled up that, oh, this is what this is reminding me of. This, which is like something that I never had the chance to process or grieve.
Yeah.
And oh, isn't that interesting? And if I had just jumped on the reaction, I never would have gotten to that space where the underlying thing could like
Yeah.
actually come up.
Where you can get in there with the roots of it and be like, oh, these roots need cleaned out. They're old.
Yeah.
So we don't need those.
Right.
We can put down new roots. We can grow new ones.
Yeah. Oh, we came full circle there.
Full circle.
Back to the
Back to the
roots, back
roots.
to the plants. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Well, so I like to ask this question just to kind of to close. But you know, the name of the show is the vital point, and there's a whole history of why that is. But for me, like the vital point is regardless of the modality or that we're using, that we have to practice it. We've got to apply it or integrate it.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something for you, either right now, alive in this moment, or just in general in your work that could be your vital point?
Ooh, that's a good question. I love that. Um, I mean, I think I am usually doing that practice of kind of allowing my feet to breathe up through my body pretty
Mm,
often. Um, and I'm also a person, they say memories are state dependent. So I'm very often, if I'm in between people or transitioning somewhere, I'm a human that kind of likes to do like a transitional stretch movement sort of thing. And I'm a big orienter. I mean, that's probably the most common, which looking is obviously the easiest, but I'm like a big fidgeter. Like I've always got a thing with me, or I'm playing with rings, or I've got lotion that smells good, or some sort of sensory thing that I like that I can just let myself like, and then deepening that how much I like it thing and notice it, even if it's like 30 seconds.
yeah, I love that. The orienting is so important. And in addition to, if you're listening to this, in addition to, Rachel's opening, we've had a couple of different, SEPs doing orienting practices on the show. So definitely
Super
go
cool.
back through the back catalog and find one that resonates with you, because we've got quite a few examples that are so awesome. And I love having, like I said in the beginning, like I love like hearing other people's the way that they invite you to the practice. And um,
Totally.
just I feel like I learned so much. Just like, oh wait, there's a little nugget. I'm gonna take that into my toolkit, or
Totally.
my recipe, just to
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
follow your analogy, right? um and I love that too. Like one of my mindfulness meditation teachers said that too. Like he's like, we don't like to talk about the meditation too much beforehand, because because if I gave you a recipe, it wouldn't make you any less hungry.
I love it.
You got to cook it up for yourself.
And you
And
might
now you
like
got the
different
recipe.
spices.
Right. Yeah,
You might want
exactly.
more salt than I would, or more like priming goes a
Yep.
long way. So I'm always like, here's a general curiosity. What do you notice? There's
Yeah.
no wrong way to notice yourself.
Yeah. I had this realization like literally last week, where I realized how much I was orienting to smell, especially in places that I found comforting or like coming back to over and over and over again, that
Totally.
had a particular scent. And like just how like comforting and like inviting that felt.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh wait, orienting to smell. That's so cool. Like
That's my favorite thing to orient to, I think. Like that and like touch. I'm like, in the morning with like a cup of coffee, that's the other thing I do. I have like a 10-minute
Mm.
morning coffee or morning beverage if I'm not drinking coffee that day, where it's like I like curved mugs that feel good in my hand that have thumbs, and the warmth of that and like the smell and the sounds of my house. It's like this just sweet little package. Like smell is a huge thing we orient to that we just don't talk about as much.
Yeah. Yeah. So you guys have homework is, noticing
We
the things
expect
that you
reports.
like and and don't like, and then just getting curious about, how do you know? And there's so much curiosity and exploration to do there. And I know Ted Lasso kind of made it famous, but curiosity being the opposite of judgment. And
Totally.
there's so much value to that.
So much value. So much
Yeah.
sweetness when we're curious with ourselves.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, Rachel, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for taking your time to chat and to share your experience.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. It was so
Yeah.
delicious. It was so nice to be
Um,
here.
we'll add it to the show page, but just in case somebody's like driving or something, if they want to get a hold of you to work with you, how can they do that? What's the best way?
Oh, I have a very long email, but my name it's my name at somaticloveandhealing.com. So Rachel, Rachel, somaticloveandhealing.com.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll make sure to put that on the show page and link to your Instagram as well,
Thanks.
and whatever else is a good way to get in touch with you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I hope that you found value and inspiration in this episode. If it struck a chord with you, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could take a moment and leave me a review. It's a simple, cost-free way to show support and help more like-minded people discover the show. Make sure that you check Rachel out. You can find her at somaticloveandhealing.com or on Instagram at somaticloveandhealing. Rachel is an excellent practitioner. I've done lots of work, lots of sessions with her, and definitely recommend checking her out if you need some support with your somatic journey or getting started with that and what that means. Also, come check us out on the school site, school.com/Blue Magic Alchemy. Sign up for the newsletter there, get guided meditations and breathwork practices, as well as check out the upcoming live calendar. Remember, it's not about the method that you choose or the pace at which you travel. The vital point is to consistently show up for yourself and practice. As the saying goes, it's not the destination, the journey is what truly matters. And I am honored to walk with you on your pathway to integration. Please don't hesitate to reach out, to connect, to share your journey, the successes and challenges alike. I'm just an email, DM, or review away. Let's journey, grow, and transform together. Thanks again for tuning in. Until the next episode, keep exploring, keep growing, and above all, keep practicing, because that's the vital point.